Hello, people. Welcome to the HBCU Sports Podcast. I'm Senior Editor Kendrick Marshall, along with our newest addition, Jarrett Hoffman. He's our Division II contributor and a recruiting expert. And so tonight is midseason across the landscape of Black college football. And so we're going to dip a little bit in giving out some midseason grades for the SWAC and the MEAC this evening. There's been some really exciting football already being played across both conferences. Some conference races will be decided in the next few weeks, but we're gonna take a look back tonight at the progress of these teams from the MEAC and the SWAC. So far, it's like I said before, it's been a really exciting season for everybody. And some surprises, some disappointments, some really good performances through the first 6 weeks of the season. And so Jared and I are going to break down the SWAC and MEAC conferences and see if kind of the grades align with what everybody else out there sees. So we're going to start first with the SWAC. We know first place JSU, we're going to start with them. They're currently undefeated overall. They're 5-0, undefeated in the SWAC. So Jared, at this point in the season, what grade would you give the Tigers so far?
I mean, it kind of be disrespectful not to give them an A+, right? I mean, the one thing that was the scariest prospect for Jackson State was a lethal offense, because we know them for their defense last season. They had James Houston, they had Aubrey Miller, a bunch of guys, pass rushing. They had, secondary is amazing. The one dangerous thing was giving Shedeur Sanders some dangerous pieces on offense, to just grow that offense. And lo and behold, he has Sevion Wilkerson, he has Dallas Daniels, he has Kevin Coleman. That offense is lethal, and they are looking like a team that is unbeatable. They look like a team that is going to run through the SWAC. They're going to make up for losing in the Celebration Bowl. And I'll go a step further and say this is a team that looks like they could win the FCS. That's how dangerous they look right now. So it would be disrespectful to say anything less than an A+.
So do you see like any flaws in the team? I know last year the offensive line was kind of an aspect of their team that was kind of a hindrance to them along with the running game. Through these first 5-6 games of the season, you think they kind of cleared those issues up?
Well, yeah, I think the one thing that they've had a tough time with is that there's times where they have lulls. Against Tennessee State, they were struggling to move down the field. This past game against Alabama State, hindered them. Before they went on their run, they have times where they can go to sleep. And then they'll be like, all right, I'm gonna put my foot on the gas now. So I think they need to get off to faster starts and not, underestimate who they're going against. Not accusing them of that, but it could be perceived that they're, sleeping on the team that's across from them. So I think if they put on their foot on the gas early, and then just coast, they would be very, very dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, Deion Sanders talks about like how they want to dominate in every game. And he's been really concerned the last few weeks about the slow starts to get off to in the first half, especially. I know last week against Alabama State only scored 10 points in the first half, which is unusual for that offense to try to do. But it was the Alabama State's homecoming. It was a conference opponent. So those games are always going to be a little bit tougher to play. But in the second half, Jackson State was able to pull away like they have normally done the last 12 times out against SWAC opponents. So I think you're right, Jared. I would give them an A+2. I don't see any team in the SWAC beating them this year, just like last year. I thought last year maybe was the chance for teams in the conference to get them. But this year, with the depth they have on both sides of the ball, and got to realize they're missing 4 starters, namely Silo Sanders and Travis Hunter. Both are back practicing for the team. They should be back in a few weeks. They get those guys back in short order. I don't think they'll be challenged the rest of the way. Let's move on to Florida A&M staying in the SWAC East. They got off to a 0-2 start, kind of aided by some off the field issues with compliance, eligibility, missing some players. They've won 4 straight, impressive in all 4 games. So, Jarrett, after looking at this team for the first 6 weeks of the season, what do you kind of see them at so far?
This is a tough team to grade because it's like, do you grade them on a curve because you know that they went through, what they went through at the start of the season? Do you kind of say like it's a part of it's so weird. We've never seen anything like this. So I gotta go by what I've seen from Florida A&M, and I'm gonna give them an A-. And here's why. It would have been an A had it not been for that Jackson State game. That Jackson State game was horrible. But there you go back with do you grade them on a curve? Because, they had little time to build chemistry as a unit on the field. But 59-3 is just you never.
It's hard to overlook. Yeah,
we did not expect that at all. But they've since recovered. They got an impressive win over Mississippi Valley State. They grinded it out against South Carolina State. Nearly giving up a 17-0 lead. So, but they've looked better. They're not the same. They're definitely not the same team from last team. They're not the defensive juggernaut that they once were. Not the same running team that they once were. But Jeremy Musa, he has had a very good season for them. He played very well against UNC. And he's been playing well ever since as a candidate for the SWAC Newcomer of the Year award. I do not think he's the leader. I will get to that when we get to the team that we talk about. But he has looked very good for them, and I think if by some miracle Jackson State loses too, we'll see if they're able to win out. But likelihood of that happening, I don't know.
Yeah, like I would give FAMU a B+ because of that JSU game, just because, like you mentioned before, like them almost blowing the lead to South Carolina State, and then actually falling behind Alabama A&M at home, had to make a second half rally. So they haven't played as strong as they did last year after the first game of the season when they lost to JSU. But Jeremy Musa has really stabilized the quarterback position after having the second game against JSU. There was concern about maybe, he may not be ready, or he may not be the quarterback that FAMU would need to kind of get them over the hump in the SWAC East, but he settled down and played some really good football. Their defense is still pretty good. I mean, Isaiah Land is still great, though he's had some quiet games these first 6. So FAMU, just like last year, they're going to be the second best team in the East, and they got to hope for a Jackson State miracle that they lose twice or to try to win the division. But that FAMU is going to, I think they're probably going to win out, I would say, like they did last year. They won't be a playoff team this year, I don't think. I think the JSU game kind of hurt them, and losing to North Carolina the start of the season hurt them too. But they're still a really, really good football team nonetheless. Now moving on to Alabama A&M. They're currently 2-1 in the SWAC conference, 2-4 overall. They've won their last 2. So Jarrett, I know they struggled out of the gate, losing their first 4. Mm-hmm. So what grade would you give them so far?
It's unfortunate because that's a team that's moving on from a generational quarterback in Akil Glass, but I got to give them a B-. They struggled against Bethune-Cookman, barely won that one. A Grambling State team who we'll get to, who has been underwhelming, and they had to battle to the death to get past them. They got torched by Austin, PA. As you said, they gave up the lead to Florida A&M. This is a team in a rebuilding stage, that unfortunately isn't in the same division as Florida A&M and Jackson State, who are objectively better. So I think they're just cursed by being in a division where it's 2 and everybody else is just there.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. Like, I was a little bit hopeful for them coming into the season because, like, in the offseason, they grabbed like so many guys on defense from the transfer portal. I think it was like 9 defensive players they targeted in the transfer portal. And you would hope because the offense was like so great with Glass at quarterback that they only had a little bit of defense, they could possibly make a run at the SWAC championship. But they lost Glass, and then they had this amalgamation of different quarterbacks that they were trying to solidify in spring ball. They settled in on Quincy Casey, Jack State transfer. He didn't play very well the first couple weeks of the season at all. But his bounce back since has some solid outings in the last couple games that they won. But I'm gonna give them like a C. Like, it's hard to overcome an 0-4 start. And the opponents they beat, Bethune-Cookman and Grambling, aren't exactly the best teams in the league. As a matter of fact, they combined to have just 2 wins on the season so far between them. So yeah, like their resume isn't very impressive. So I'm gonna give them a C, just based on that alone.
You're not wrong. I mean,
yeah, I mean, like Alabama A&M I thought they would compete, but this first half of the season has kind of shown that they're just not ready yet.
I think the one thing I would say is that the one thing that's been disappointing about Alabama A&M is the offense. You know, the running game. They had to transfer Donovan England, who has been playing well, but I figured, where's Gary Quarles? You know what I mean? I haven't seen a single Gary Quarles sighting. You know, I was expecting him to have a big game, you know, at some point this season, and it just hasn't happened. Donovan England is taking over the RB1 spot, and you know, Gary Quarles is falling by the wayside. You know, and they have lost more than just, you know, Aquil on the offense. You know, Odu Hilaire is no longer with the team. You know, but they still it's just not the same team that, you know, we saw in the 2021 spring season. This is a huge fall from what that was, and that comes with Aquil Glass being gone now.
Yeah, he seemed like he was holding up everything for that team. I mean, like Gary Quarles able to get some running lanes, not be the focal point of different defenses because they had to respect Glass. Now Glass not there, and so it's not as easy for Quarles to get the yards he did last year. And it trickles down to the wide receivers. They're facing different coverages. They're not respected as much because the quarterback situation there isn't as settled as it was last season or the previous year. So the domino effect of not having Glass has really like hampered that ball club from like top to bottom. And so it's the reason why they're 2-4 in the season. Yeah, so moving on to Bethune-Cookman, who actually won a SWAC game this early in the season after waiting to the end of the season last year to win their first SWAC game. They're 1-4 in the season. They got Jackson State and Jacksonville coming up on Saturday. They're likely going to lose that game, drop to 1-5 and 1-2 in the SWAC East. So how would you measure their progress so far this first half of the season, Garrett?
I haven't seen much improvement from them at all. You know, and I think the one thing that we were all looking forward to with Bethune-Cookman was Kamar Avery. You know, he was coming off an 800 receiving yard season last season. We're thinking like, you know, he's going to put up big numbers this year, and he's just going to, you know, go to the HBCU Legacy Bowl, probably go to the Senior Bowl or NFLPA Bowl. He's going to put on a show, and he'll probably go late 5th, 6th round in the NFL draft. And he's had one or two good games, and he got completely shut down in the season opener against Miami. You know, where we were hoping that he was going to put up some big numbers against them like he did last season. I forget which FBS opponent they were going against last season, but he put up some big numbers against them. And this season, he wasn't able to really make that impact in that FBS game, you know. And since then, he still hasn't really put up big numbers. He had a pretty good game. He had 5 catches against Grambling State, 60-something yards, and had a touchdown in that game, but hasn't really had that signature performance that scouts can look at and be like, I want to draft that guy. You know what I mean? He's still a matchup nightmare. He's a big dude. He's shifty. You know, he he can make big plays, but he just hasn't been able to do it this season. And he was the guy that we were looking for when we watched Bethune-Cookman, and he hasn't been able to produce so far. So I got to give them about, at best, a C-.
You're very generous, Jared. I would say that very much.
I'm being very nice with these grades.
Yeah, I know, like great on the curve, man. Like I would give Bethune-Cookman probably like a D if I'm being really, really generous. A lot of it, again, like Alabama State, like depends on the quarterback play. And they haven't gotten very good quarterback play the first half of the season. I know Jalen Jones, a guy who was kind of highly touted coming from Florida. Then he went to Jackson State, into the transfer portal. He has played up and down, I would say, all season long. He had his moments against Grambling. But other than that, like the quarterback play's been holding him back. I think that's why their star tight end hasn't produced like we all thought he would. But on the defensive side of the ball, it hasn't been very good either. That was kind of like the hallmark of the team for so long. And in too many games, they get up too many long drives. They're giving up too many big plays. So it just again a domino effect of like how short they are in terms of like roster depth, quality of depth, and just consistent week in and week out play across the board. So for them, they have a long way to go to get back to where they were when they were in the MEAC, unfortunately. Yeah, staying in the SWAC East, Alabama State, first-year head coach Eddie Robinson Jr., whose name has been all over the place this last week for some off-the-field stuff. But like Alabama State, I would give them a B. They played really, really hard. I know they're only 1-2 in the conference so far. Both their losses have been pretty much close games in the league. They fought Jackson State pretty well to the fourth quarter, but I would give them like a solid B for the way they played so far this season. Eddie Robinson, not much expected of him coming into the season, being the first year head coach with not a lot of experience, but like he's got that team playing hard each and every week. So I give him a B. Jared, what do you give him?
I'll be right there with you. B- at the worst. I think they've played very well defensively. Like you said, against Jackson State, they held them without any points in the first quarter. They stayed in the game through the first three, and then, as we said, Jackson State just put on the gas. I think they, through the tumultuous circumstances of that MEAC SWAC challenge, throughout that game, when they were actually able to play, they were actually playing very well against, a Howard team that we'll get to, not the most impressive team, but they looked impressive in that game. Alabama State, with Keenan Isaac, in that secondary, that is a solid team, that is a very gritty, they'll make plays when they need to, and they keep games close, so I like them going forward, if they keep that defensive intensity.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Alabama State, they can finish probably third in the SWAC East, right behind JSU and FAMU. And that wouldn't be a bad season for them. I mean, like with expectations so low, with the coaching change and trying to establish a new culture, I think third place in the SWAC is probably where they should be. And now we move on to Mississippi Valley State. They're 0-6 overall, 0-3 in the SWAC. Once again, fighting another uphill battle for the reasons we already know why Mississippi Valley State is always fighting an uphill battle. It's hard to judge this team because they play so hard under Vincent Dancy each and every week, but they just lack the depth of talent across the board. We thought with Jamari Jones, the JUCO transfer from East Mississippi coming over, that they will be better on offense. And they've shown a little bit of improvement since he's been named the starter, but just not enough to overcome just the mounting issues that they continue to have with their roster construction and just the depth of their talent. So I'm going to give Mississippi Valley State a D+ for the first half of the season.
I was not expecting to be the mean one on this one. Look, I understand, the roster issues and all that stuff. Positive on Mississippi Valley State. Ronnie Jordan, probably the best defensive lineman in the SWAC easily. Leading the SWAC in tackles for loss, leading in sacks. Caleb Johnson is a solid back for them. Makes big plays out of the backfield for them. But at the end of the day, they lost to a Division II Delta State team. Now, for those who don't know, Delta State is a very good program. Just dominated against Valdosta State recently. But that is a Division II team that you have lost to before. I can't give you more than D- for that alone. That you cannot lose to a Division II team under any circumstances.
I would say the other state did give JSU a run for their money last year, though.
They did.
So there's not a run-of-the-mill Division II team. Like, they're actually pretty good.
Right.
Yeah, but man, I don't know what's going to take for Valley to get over that hump. I mean, like last season, they ended on a really high note. They finished strong, but this season they haven't been able to catch a break. It seems like
this is a team that last season beat North Carolina Central.
Yes.
This is not a team that doesn't have just they don't have nobody. They had some success last.
They got guys, yeah.
And like you said, they had the JUCO transfer that I thought that he was going to have some kind of an impact, but it just hasn't come together. Maybe we need to reach out to a famous alumni who may be considered the greatest wide receiver in NFL history. I don't know, maybe, but in all seriousness, Mississippi Valley State, they're a team that has two great players who could potentially be in the NFL or USFL soon, XFL maybe, they have guys that could be at the pro level, but it's just something that has to come together in terms of whether it be talent or I don't know, it's coaching. I don't know what it is, but it's the future doesn't look bright.
Yeah, they always playing from behind, which is never a good place to be, especially when you're school that, like Mississippi Valley State, has like lower resources than everybody else and just struggles to consistently build that depth on their roster. They need a lot of things to go right for them to be successful. Yeah, now moving on to the SWAC West, we go to Alcorn State, currently leading the division at 2-0. They've won their last three. They could have been 4-1 if not for a shocking collapse against the number 10 team in the country the first weekend of the season. But we kind of wonder how they will look without Felix Harper and some of the household names that they had over the years. And they found a running back that has kind of carried the load for them.
Did they?
Yes, they did. They found a running back that has carried the load for them, and has led them to their last three wins. And so, which made their team so much more dangerous, not to rely on just solely the passing game and solely just one in the quarterback having to do everything. Alcorn State, for now, based on the way they play, I'll give them an A, at least an A-, I'd say. They lead the division, as I said. They got a big game this weekend against Southern that's going to probably decide who wins that division. But I think for right now, Alcorn is the best team in the SWAC outside of Jackson State.
I'm right there with you, And we were just talking about SWAC Newcomer of the Year. Jarvian Howard is my guy. That's probably my favorite HBCU back. I mean, that man, he just doesn't know how to not make big plays. Like, he is just a big play magnet, man. And you could only wonder what would it have been like had he played with Felix Harper. That would have been like similar to a Baltimore Raven, like when the Baltimore Ravens had, Lamar Jackson and, Mark Ingram, you know what I mean, in that backfield. They would have been defenses would have been, just trying to catch their breath, trying to catch those guys, man. That I'm gonna match that A. I feel like they're a team. I think they're gonna represent the West in the SWAC championship game. and I'll get to why we cover Southern, but that team I believe is going to win the West.
Yeah, I do too. Like I think so too. Like, I mean, we could get like a preview of the SWAC championship game when they play Jackson State, the last game of the season at Alcorn, a rare game between those two teams at each other's home facility. So that will be a really good game later on in the year. We're gonna get to Southern right now. They're currently tied for second place in the SWAC West. They won their last two games in impressive fashion. They blew away Prairie View in what I thought was Southern's best game they played so far, outside of beating up on the poor little sister of the poor the first game of the season. But yeah, like Southern, I would give them right now, I say a B, just based on that first game, because I think you got to throw one out. That was kind of like a preseason game for them, and then they play LSU at LSU, and they got completely blown off the ball that game. So I didn't count those two games, but these last three they played kind of give you an indication of like the kind of team Southern is. Though they had a setback against Southern being shut out 21-0, but they had the bye week and bounced back. So I give them a B for the way they responded to some adversity early on in the season.
Wow, I'm the mean one again. I got to give them a C+, and this is why. You bring in Jason Dumas, along with Jordan Lewis on that defensive line. You bring in Jayshawn Greathouse, who was a JUCO All-American. You bring in Dimitri Morcell and Jordan Carter from Bowie State, both guys who were all CIAA. Dimitri Morcell was a former CIAA Defensive Player of the Year. We're looking at that defense before the season, and we're saying that team is going to be a juggernaut. And you get shut out by Texas Southern. And they've recovered, like you said, they've recovered, but I can't. That on paper, you look at that game on paper, Southern versus Texas Southern, and you're thinking it's Andrew Body versus everybody else on Southern. You know what I mean? That, with all due respect, that's how we looked at that game, and essentially he won.
Yeah.
He ascended decisively. There was no doubt about it, no debate about it, and Southern has just not looked like that team that we thought was going to be a shoo-in to win the SWAC West and go against Jackson State in the SWAC championship game. And looking at Alcorn State, I don't think they can stop Jarvie and Howard. I don't know. I haven't seen anything that Southern has done on the defensive end, except for their last game against Prairie View, that makes me think that they will be able to consistently hold Jarvie and Howard. And I feel like he's going to go for big numbers in that game, and they're gonna blow them out of the water. So, the grade C+.
Yeah, I mean, that matchup definitely going to be one to watch. The two best teams on that side of the SWAC. Yeah, but Southern, like, you would hope the offense would be a little bit more explosive consistently, considering Eric Dooley, their coach, is an offensive guy. And what he did at Prairie View was really impressive. But let's see where they at against Alcorn. Has a really good defense, who presents some issues for them in terms of like the running game, missing before, and also the passing attack too. So yeah, like that's gonna decide the division, like I said before. So Southern a B, you a little bit more, you'll be a little more meaner than me. So we'll see what happens.
I made it up with a couple of nice grades in the beginning.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, let's move on to the team that Southern played last week, Prairie View. They're currently 3-1 in the SWAC, 3-3 overall, coming off that loss against Southern. Once again, first-year head coach Bubba McDowell has really got those guys playing at a high level so far. Some surprising good performances, I'd say. I will give them a solid B, maybe a B+, just based on where they play. Surprised some people who didn't think with Dooley gone and Bubba McDowell in there that they will sustain themselves as one of the better teams, at least on the west side of the SWAC. So that's my grade. I'm gonna stick to it. What say you, Jarrett?
I mean, it's hard for me to say Southern was a C plus, and they already beat Prairie View. But what I will say about Prairie View is they've been very shocking this season. Like you said, losing Eric Dooley, losing Jason Dumas, losing Drake Cheatham, who is now at Kansas State, transferred to Kansas State. You losing all those players, and I didn't think that there was any chance that they would be competitive. So the fact that they were in a position to where they were at the top of the division in the first place, I didn't see that coming at all. And they've been, minus the Southern game, they've been very competitive. You know what I mean? And still have a chance to, be in a position to where they're in their second straight SWAC championship game. So, but with all that being said, I can't give them a better grade than Southern. So I just have to match their grade for Southern.
Yeah, that's probably fair. Yeah, like with a break here or two, they could be right back in a conference championship game again this season. Moving on to the Andrew Bodies, as we call them, Texas Southern. They're currently 2-2 in the SWAC West, 2-4 overall. A lot of people had them as kind of like the sleeper team to probably come out the West on the strength of like Andrew Body's progression to the quarterback. They got off to a little bit of a slow start, but they since rebounded a little bit. I would give them right now a C- because I kind of expected more Andrew Body, but he's been like really up and down. Had the high of the Southern game, and then the low of the UTSA game they played, non-conference play. If he can be more consistent, and they're hoping he can take that next step to be the second best quarterback in the league behind Shadur Sanders, I think Texas Southern could be right in there with Alcorn State and Southern. But at this point of the season, Texas Southern just not there yet.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you there. One dangerous prospect about Texas Southern: if you give Andrew Body some capable receivers, some big play receivers, that team is going to be dangerous. You give them a backfield threat too, give them a running back threat too, that team is going to be dangerous. Andrew Body, I was actually kind of surprised that they didn't put him on the Black College Player of the Year watch list, with all the talk around him during the off season, people comparing him to Michael Vick, you know what I mean? And I watched him, he was very impressive. I don't know about the Michael Vick comparison, but I was very impressed by his play. He had some big games, last year, and I thought he was going to come in and, have that same impact this year. Not to the same extent. He hasn't done that to the same extent as he did last year, but he's played very well. You know what I mean? And I'm just waiting to see if, before he is no longer there, if they're able to, put some talent around him that allow him to live up to his full potential and get Texas Southern to a point where they're actually competitive in this SWAC. But as of right now, I gotta give him a C.
Yeah, that's a fair grade. Like you said before, like if they can get Andrew Body to play the way everybody thinks he can play, then that could be a contender right away. So we'll see. Next team up is Arkansas Pine Bluff. They're currently 0-3 in the SWAC so far. They got off to a strong start, but have stumbled the last 3 weeks. I'm gonna give them a D-, because like Mississippi Valley State, they don't have a lot of room for error because of the way their roster is constructed. I mean, they have Skylar Perry, quarterback, who's been a very good quarterback for them over the years, but they just lack that depth to stay with some teams in the league. I mean, like 2 years ago, they surprised some people, got all the way to the SWAC championship game and nearly beat Alabama A&M to win the title. But since then, either the league is caught up with them or they've regressed, and they've gone through a period of regression as soon as they get in the conference play. So that's why I'm gonna stick with my D for them so far.
I gotta match that. I got to, And one thing that isn't going to be talked about with them is they lost, their leading defender in the secondary, Andre Fuller, who's now at Toledo. He was a guy that I believe he had 6 interceptions or something like that last season. He was one of the leaders in pass defended last year. Was a huge part of that defense. They do have 2 wins, but you look at the quality of those 2 wins. A Lane team that did beat Tennessee State. They did beat Tennessee State.
It might be a quality win based on that.
Yeah, it might be. But still, that's a Division 2 team. And you got a North American team who is in AIA. You look at the rest of their schedule; they got blown out of the water by Southern. They lost to Texas Southern and they lost to Alcorn State. You know what I mean? And if it wasn't for the next team that we're about to talk about, they would probably be the most disappointing team in the SWAC. But I'm going to match your D-.
Okay. Yeah, and that next team we're going to talk about is obviously Grambling State. The Tigers, under Hugh Jackson in his first season as coach, 0-3 in the SWAC. 1-5 overall. They've lost their last 4, and their players have lost the right to wear the G on their helmets. Yeah, this is an easy one for me. They get an F. They played so well against Northwestern. And then they haven't been able to find their way since. And I don't know what's happened since that game. So just hasn't been consistent on offensive ball. Hugh Jackson talked about they got to put 4 quarters together. They got to solidify their quarterback position. They've started to go a little bit more with a multi-quarterback system. They got a 2 freshmen out there, Calvez, who gave them a spark from time to time when they need some help and try to move the ball and do some things on offense, but hasn't worked out in the win. They came close last week against Alabama A&M, but lost in overtime to the Bulldogs to drop their 4th straight game. So it's I think the morale is kind of low, despite what maybe Hugh Jackson says, and I just don't see them doing any better the rest of the way. Maybe they sneak out a game or 2 this season in terms of the win column, but I think they're going to pretty much stay at the bottom of the SWAC West.
Can I go lower than an F? Because look, if you looked at during the offseason, they acquired a lot of transfers, a lot of D1 transfers. You got the excitement of Hugh Jackson, a former NFL head coach, didn't have much success in the NFL, but he's an NFL head coach coming to your program. There's a lot of hype around you. You're talking all this smack to Southern, they're going to do that regardless. But, you're talking all this smack about winning the SWAC West, and it's just been, you plummet. You know what I mean? It's rare that we see a team have 1 win on the season, and that 1 win is actually a non-conference win.
And it's a good win, too. It's not like
a good win.
It's a good win, yeah.
Yeah, and they're losing by double digits to these teams. They lost Bethune-Cookman 36-19. They lose to Prairie View 34-14. Their only close game has been against Alabama A&M. They got destroyed by Jackson State, but who hasn't? But what I mean? It's just these games haven't even been close. And then you got the stuff with the G on the helmet, and it's like I don't know if this is a coaching error or if this is a players not living up to expectations error. I don't know what it is, but taking the G off the helmet ain't gonna solve nothing at this point. I think there needs to be a players only meeting. I think there needs to be a coaches meeting. I think there needs to be a coaches and player meeting. There needs to be a bunch of meetings because whatever is going on, it's not working. So F for sure.
Yeah, losing the G is the least of their problems right now. And it's going to take more than getting the G back for Grambling to turn things around, especially this season.
Right.
Now we're going to move on to the MEAC 6-team conference. Starting with there's actually a game going on actually tonight as we're recording.
As we're
recording, actually. North Carolina Central is taking on Morgan State. And we're going to jump right to those teams, starting with North Carolina Central. They're 4-1 right now. Hadn't played a conference game yet. Their last time out, they lost 48-18 to Campbell over in the Big South. And so they played really well, except for that one game. They started the season off with a big time win in the Dukes Mayo Classic. I covered that game here in Charlotte, North Carolina. They upset North Carolina A&T to win that one, and they actually got a top 25 win that vaulted them into the FCS top 25 poll. So they made some really impressive headway under Trey Oliver. So I'll give them an A. Despite the loss to Campbell, that was kind of like a sleepy day at Campbell. They didn't seem to be pretty much into the game, but it doesn't negate the way they played the previous 4 times out. So I'm gonna give them an A just based on their entire resume so far.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you with that. It's unfortunate that Campbell lost because I think that had they won that game, you can't deny that they're a team to be reckoned with. They're still a team to be reckoned with. You know what I mean? But I think that loss kind of took them down a peg. If people are watching it right now, the score is 35-13 currently as we speak, and so they're handling business right now against Morgan State. So that lets you know that they haven't lost any confidence. You know what I mean? And one player that I like from them is their defensive back Khalil Baker. He's a guy that leads the conference in interceptions. He had four an interception each of the team's first 4 games. One of the leaders in the country in interceptions still, even though he's missed a game. You know what I mean? That defense is filled with top guys in their secondary. It's not just him, but he's a guy that stands out. You know what I mean? That if they go against Jackson State in the Celebration Bowl, we could have a repeat of what happened last season with all the guys that they have in their secondary. Don't be surprised if North Carolina Central pulls off an upset if they're able to make it past, the rest of the conference and make it to the Celebration Bowl. But as for right now, I'm going to match your A.
Okay, cool. And their opponent tonight, who's being handled so far, Morgan State, despite the score, a coach well, Damon Wilson, former Bowie State coach, he's got them competitive. They only won 3 games over 2 years with Tyrone Wheatley, their coach, before he left to go to the NFL. They've already won 2 already, and they seem to be going in the right direction. So based on that, not counting tonight, but based on that, I'll give him a B because he's a program builder. We know Damon Wilson is. He built Bowie State to what they are now. Still left a lot of good players in the cupboard. They're still pretty competitive. So I have no doubt in my mind that Morgan State under Wilson is going to be competitive too.
See, I'm torn because my Bowie State bias wants me to give them an A+, but I got to be realistic, and I'm going to say a B-. You know what I mean? If you look at their losses this year, they're very competitive losses. They were competitive against Towson. They beat Sacred Heart, a reigning conference champion. You know what I mean? They beat Virginia University of Lynchburg. Not the most impressive win considering, the opponent. And they were competitive against a Norfolk State. Unfortunately, they lost against a Norfolk State team that is not as good as they were last season, but still a solid team with some good players. You know what I mean? But one thing is that, like you said, Coach Damon Wilson is a program builder. He establishes a culture and he upholds it. He still got pretty much all the guys that he had back in Bowie State. Antoine Sewell's the defensive coordinator there. And he's coaching that defense up. He is a no-nonsense guy, and you can see it with their effort. You know what I mean? And this is a team, it's not going to be very long before they're back to being competitive in the MEAC. But as we stand, at best, we can give them a B-.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, like the first year or so, it is going to be kind of like establishing the foundation. And then, I think, with recruits, they're going to come in over the next couple of years, especially with Wilson's ability to do that very well. And him being from the area, too, I think Morgan State's going to be a football program that's going to be reckoned with down the line for sure. And now we go to Howard. Howard, they are currently 1-4. They lost their last 3. They have not played a MEAC game yet. They're staying on the Ivy League tour this week again. They played Yale last week, and they're going to play Harvard this week. So they just haven't done well at all. I mean, they had what was arguably their best recruiting class ever coming into the 2022 season. But as of now, it hasn't produced much results in terms of like a positive way. They were competitive opening night. The MEAC SWAC challenge against Alabama State. They lost that game due to a weather delay. But they just haven't been able to put things together on offense all season long. So I'm gonna give them a D- because of that. They just don't seem to have very many positive signs moving forward that they're going to be a team that's going to see a lot of improvement moving forward. So that's what I'm gonna go with so far.
Dang, I got to go back to being nice. I'm actually going to give them a C-. And the reason why is that, there hasn't been as many blowouts as I thought it was going to be. You know what I mean? They didn't get blown out by Hampton. They were close with Hampton. They were close with Alabama State. And given the conditions of that game, the fact that they didn't get blown out in that game and they didn't get blown out against Yale. You know what I mean? I think they've been very competitive. Of course, there's a lot that they need to work on. You know what I mean? It's not a lot of talent on that team. They have Darren Brokenberg, on that defensive line. They have, Quentin Williams at quarterback. They have some solid talent, but it's just about putting the pieces together. You know what I mean? I think, we just talked about Damon Wilson. If we had him down there at Howard, it could be a different story. But a fifth was a fifth. So I think they're. I'm not saying that they're close. I'm not saying at all that they're close, but they're doing a lot better than what people may have expected. So at worst, I'll say they're about a D+.
Okay, yeah, actually, they have been a little bit more competitive than they were last year, especially. But they're judged by wins and losses and haven't won very many games this year, so they're going to probably judged kind of unfairly or harshly because of that. So moving on to Delaware State, they are 3-2 overall. Haven't played a conference game yet. They're in 3rd place in the MEAC. This is a team that always plays hard. They fly on the radar. They're not a very flashy team. You know what you're gonna expect from them. And they always seem to be in every ball game. It seems like they had a shot last year to actually win the MEAC before they kind of like stumbled down the stretch a little bit. But based on their performances this season, I will give Delaware State a strong C+. I would say they're a strong C+ type of team.
I'd go slightly lower with a C. This is not the most spectacular 3-2 team in the world. Their 2 wins are against, Lincoln, who is a low to mid-level Division II team, and against Virginia University Lynchburg, who, as I mentioned before, not the most impressive team in the world. They did get a good win against Robert Morris, but losing Sivion Wilkerson, I'm actually surprised that they're still competitive. You know what I mean? This is still and the fact that Asias Guthrie is currently in the transfer portal. One of the best defensive backs in the country, and he's in the transfer portal. So your best player on offense and your best player on defense, and you're still competitive. You know what I mean? And so I do give them props for that, but this has not been the most impressive 3-2 run. So I'd go with a C.
Yeah, Ross Mills had them boys ready to play regardless. But yeah, I'm grading on the curve because there's not a lot of high expectations for them anyway. So just to get the 3 wins they got and kind of like how they played throughout the season deserves some credit, I'd say.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So moving on to Norfolk State, we just talked about how they upended Morgan State last week. They're currently 1-5 overall, 1-0 in the conference. They have lost their first 5 games in a row, And this is a program under Dawson older than the second year that started out last season on fire in conference play. They won their first 4 games of the MEAC slate before they collapsed at the end with a chance to actually win the conference or the Celebration Bowl. But this season is a lost one in terms of like any postseason hopes they may have. But though they can still win the MEAC theoretically if they go on a run. I know it's early in the conference play, but I give them right now, based on their start alone, I'm going to throw out their win against Morgan State because that win isn't indicative of kind of like the team that they are. I'm going to give them a D based on their start this season.
Yeah, I'm going to have to match that D. And this is another team that is cursed by, losing their best offensive and defensive player, Jawan Carter at quarterback and Chris Myers on the defensive end, but and the fact that, they lost Kevin Johnson, one of their running backs who's now at Hampton. You know what I mean? And you still have JJ Davis, but JJ Davis hasn't really played up to par so far this season. You know what I mean? He was picked to be MEAC preseason offensive player of the year, and he hasn't looked like a guy that could be a candidate for that award so far. You know what I mean? So it's unfortunate that you have to play through those losses, but that's how sports are. You got to play with what you have, next man up. That's how it is, and so far they haven't. The good news for them is that their one win on the season is an important one because he's in the conference championship race. South Carolina State showed us that, they did not start the season well, but they went on a run later in the season, winning their last 5, sweeping the MEAC and going on to win the Celebration Bowl and winning that, so it's not impossible, but as it currently stands, this is a D.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, anything's possible. And I kind of wrote them off earlier, but like I don't see them making the South Carolina State type of run to get back in this thing. I think the conference, even though it's not to the same caliber of the SWAC, maybe it's still going to be a challenge for them to try to overcome North Carolina Central and South Carolina State, who we'll get to in a minute. Really competitive teams in their own right. So yeah, like it's going to be hard for Norfolk State to try to make a turnaround this season, I think. So South Carolina State, well, we're on them, the defending Black College champions. They are 1-4. They lost their last 3. They haven't played a conference game just yet so far. Buddy Pugh heading to the season thought they probably would be in this position coming into conference play. With this type of record, he kind of looked at the schedule and was like, we could be 0-5 by the time we play our first conference game, but they're actually 1-4. They do have one win on the season. They played 2 FBS schools so far. They lost both games decisively, though they did play South Carolina pretty tough last Thursday. So I would give them probably a D for now, just based on the fact that Buddy Pugh has been saying like this team needs confidence, that needs consistency. He feels like this first conference game out the gate probably is going to decide their season. If they don't win that one, I don't think they're going to get back in the race at all. So based on that, I'll give them a D.
Yeah, I got to do the same thing, and for a different reason from me. That the talent on that offense. You got Corey Fields at quarterback, Kendrick Flowers at running back, Shaquan Davis at receiver, who got some love from South Carolina's coach last week. You think with that kind of talent, you'd at least be able to beat North Carolina A&T and be more competitive against Florida A&M, which they were a little bit more competitive down the stretch against, Florida A&M, but falling down 17-0 in that game and, losing to North Carolina A&T, who had just lost to North Carolina Central. You know what I mean? I'm not sure if it's still in the cards for them to be able to have a run like they did last season. But like I said, anything is possible in the MEAC.
Yeah, especially in the MEAC. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. but certainly not least, we're gonna move on to our Week 7 preview. There's some really good ball games this weekend, starting with tonight's game, which is turned into a blowout, but nonetheless, like there's some really good games on the schedule, starting with a really big game in the CIAA. Your Bowie State Bulldogs taking on undefeated Virginia Union. How do you handicap this one, Jarrett?
I'm trying to be objective. I really want to be objective. No, seriously. As of right now, I'd say Virginia Union is the favorite by 10 points.
Wow.
Jada Byers. Man, I wish he wasn't. I wish he was on our team. You know what I mean? That's just the back that you would want on your team. A guy that just makes plays. Like he is 200. He steps on the field and he automatically gets 200 yards. You know what I mean? That he is a matchup nightmare. But if there's any team that I believe that could handle that challenge, is Bowie State in that defensive line. They have Jordan Pryor. Still there. Even with all Bowie State's losses, they still have a chance to win the CIAA, and this is a crucial game. That win over the dominant win against Virginia State last week, keeps them in contention. This is a critical game for Bowie State. If they lose this game, it's pretty much coasting season for Virginia Union to get back to the CIAA championship game for the first time since 2007. This is an exciting game. This might be the game of the weekend.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, like, it's very rare that Bowie State plays a conference game where they're not going to be favored. And I think they're not. And I think Virginia Union is the much better team in this one. I think Virginia Union with Jada Byers, if he can't be contained, this could be a runaway early. I know Bowie State got that championship DNA, but something in me is like Virginia State just the better team this year. It's like the CIAA championship game and win that and go on to the playoffs. So I got Virginia Union in this one by double digits over Bowie State. Sorry, Jarrett. I'm sorry, man.
Hey, man, you can't be at the top of the throne all the time. We got to give them a chance. You know what I mean? But it's been a long time coming for Virginia Union. They've been a very good team for a long time. It's just been a struggle for them to get over the hump, so hopefully they take full advantage of this and they're able to, make it past the CIAAs. And because I think that if they get past the CIAAs, they're going to make a run in the Division II playoffs. They're that good.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, like another game that we're keeping an eye on at the Division II level is Albany State and Benedict. Benedict is a really good football team, man. They're top 3 in our Division II lower division poll on our website. They take on the Albany State team. That's also a very talented ball club from top to bottom. So, Jarrett, like, how do you see this one playing out?
If I were to put a spread out on this is going to be a low-scoring game. This is going to be a defensive drag-out game. I feel if I going into it, I would say Albany State by 3 points. Although Benedict is undefeated right now, and they have guys that are the real deal. If you do not know who Lubert Danellis is, look him up. Probably one of the best defensive players in the Division II ranks, not just HBCU, Division II. Zaire Scotland, running back, and Eric Phoenix at quarterback. That is a very, very good team. But right now, you got to prove to me that you're going to be able to knock off Albany State. Albany State, the only loss they've had so far this season is against Florida A&M. They have still been dominant. Like they were last season. Stephon Pierre on that defense. Marquise Fulks at running back. That is still the king of the conference. And Benedict is going to have to prove that they can knock them off because Albany State got the win last season. So we got to see if Benedict gets over the hump and beats the reigning champs this season. But for right now, I got to go with Albany State.
Yeah, I would agree with that one. Albany State, man, their defense is just hellacious, man. It's just hellacious, man. If anybody could beat Benedict, it's them. So I think Albany State is gonna win by the skin of their teeth, like you said, defensive struggle. So I got the Rams in this one, man. Now moving on to another really big game, Lane versus Miles. Now, Jarrett, why was this one the game that you kind of highlighted and spotlighted for folks to watch this week?
So this is a game for two teams who have one team who has been completely disappointing in Miles, and Lane, who has been the living definition of a roller coaster. Like, you go from beating Tennessee State, and you got that roller coaster going high, and then it just plummets with that loss against Kentucky State. You know what I mean? These are two teams that are looking to stay alive in the SIAC West. You know, if I had to go into it, I'd say that Lane is the favorite. I'd go with Lane with the favorite. If I gotta be honest, probably by 17. This Lane is led by probably easily the best defensive player in Division II, Andrew Farmer. If you don't know who Andrew Farmer is, I know I keep saying that, but Andrew Farmer, that guy is going. I would be surprised if he doesn't get some NFL looks. That guy is a beast on that defensive line, you know, and I think that this is going to be a great showcase for him. And both teams need a win to keep them alive in the race for the division. But I have Lane coming out with the win.
Yeah, for me, like this game is like hard to pick because like I don't know what Lane team I'm gonna see on Saturday, man. I don't know if it's gonna be the one against Tennessee State or is it gonna be the one against Kentucky State. They could win by 17 or lose by 17. We don't know.
And don't forget they got shut out by Benedict.
Yeah, like you don't know what you're gonna get with these
guys. You just never know what Lane team is going to show up, and it just creates so much confusion. You don't know where it's going to go.
I'm gonna pick Lane, but I'm gonna be cautiously optimistic about that pick, based on what we just talked about.
Right.
Yeah, moving on to the division one level, we got a big game in the SWAC West. We kind of touched on a little bit earlier in our midseason report card review. Alcorn State at Southern in the game that will likely decide the SWAC West. So, Jarrett, how you see this one playing out?
I mean, I already jumped out the window and said Alcorn State, right? You know what I mean? I think the thing is that I need to see a full 4 quarters from Southern's defense. If we get a full 4 quarters of Southern's defense, you know, shutting down Jarvie and Howard, you know, I think this will be a clear win for them. But also their offense needs to show up. You know what I mean? I think they need to put it together. We need one complete game. We pretty much saw one against Prairie View, but this is for all the marbles. Not really for all the marbles, but for them to push ahead. You know what I mean? Because Alcorn State is the last remaining undefeated team in conference. So this is an important game for Southern. You know what I mean? So if I had to pick, I'm going to go with Southern. I'll say the spread is about a touchdown.
A touchdown? Okay. Well, we kind of talked about this earlier with the matchup of Alcorn State's great running game versus Southern's defense. But I think this game, as in every Southern game, is going to be decided by the play of Bashawn McCray, their quarterback. He was dynamic against Prairie View. He's got the potential to be that. In any game he plays, if he can play the same way or similar to the way he played against Prairie View last week, I think Southern can give them give Alcorn a run for their money. But I just think Alcorn is just a little bit better on the lines, on both offensive and defensive lines. I think that'll be a difference. If they can get after McCray early and often and force him to be a one-dimensional football player, not be able to use his legs, force him to throw the football, I think then it's going to be some issues for Southern in this game. So I'm gonna pick Alcorn State to win this one. I say maybe by 6 points because it's a conference game, two really good teams. I expect them to be pretty close. So I got the Braves taking this one. And our final matchup, kind of a wild card game, in my opinion, FAMU versus Grambling. You know, FAMU has been hot lately, and Grambling State has not been. So, Jarrett, how you see this one playing out?
I'm trying to think of how high I'm going to go for FAMU to be the favorite. Look, the reason why I have this game as a game to watch is because at some point Grambling has to have that game where they turn it on, where it clicks. You know what I mean? It kind of was against Alabama A&M, but they didn't finish it. You know what I mean? This is their chance to finally have that big game that we have expected from them in conference. You know what I mean? And Florida A&M is still on the up and up. You know, they're still, you know, putting the pieces together and trying to, you know, to rebuild what was torn down at the beginning of the season with all their scandals and stuff. You know what I mean? This is a gut check game for Grambling State. This is a game that determines whether or not this is a team that could be competitive in the future, because they haven't shown that they can be a team that could be competitive in the future. And then that is a complete change of direction from what we saw, all the moves that they made during the offseason. You know what I mean? So this is a huge gut check game, and I'd say FAMU by 3 touchdowns.
Whoa, 21 point win, huh?
At the least.
The wild card in this one to me is like this will be the first game that Grambling has played in the SWAC at home in Hugh Jackson era, and they might get some residual boost from that, but I just don't see it. There's too much uncertainty at quarterback. Their offense doesn't seem to have an identity right now. Their defense has not played well at all for any stretches of time this entire season, except for that Northwestern game, which they won that. We think, well, Grambling is actually going to be competitive this year, and we find out, no, they're not. So, as much as I don't want to agree with you, Jarrett, I think FAMU is really going to put the hurt on them this weekend. I think it's going to be a 3 touchdown or more win for FAMU, despite them being on the road. And for both of us think a road team can win by 3 touchdowns says a lot about the home team. And we don't think the home team is very good. It's going to take a lot for Grambling to win this game. And I don't think FAMU, the way they're playing right now, is going to bend to Grambling State. Yeah, so you heard from us first. You know, feel free to shout at us, yell at us, write us angry emails and tweets and stuff like that if you don't agree with us. We'll be reading all of it. This was fun. Hopefully me and Jarrett can do this more often, not just with this, but like other subjects that happen around Black college football and Black college sports throughout the remainder of the year moving forward. So we thank everybody for tuning in. Log on to our website, HBCUsports.com, to read my work and Jarrett's work, along with our YouTube channel, videos that we post each and every week, SWAC conference, replays of the coaches' conferences, and everything else in between. Thanks again, guys. We appreciate it.